Module 6, Classification. Once you have established the context of records, you will need to begin the classification process. By implementing classification, you will be able to build links between the records that assist in the retrieval and the clarification of records. There are different methods of classification, but functionality is a conventional classification method. Once the functions are established, they can be prioritized and assessed. Functionality. Assessing functionality must begin by identifying the primary functions of the organization. A functional analysis will assist in this first step towards classification. Some functions are common to all businesses, such as finance, and can be guided by the established examples. Other functions may be specialized according to the activities of the organization. Identifying functionality must begin with the top levels of functions, such as sales, and will define the scope of each one. The records are then broken down to the intermediate or secondary functions, tertiary or subfunctions, and elemental processes, which are the very basic steps. The series is made up of all of the substeps or actions in the subfunctions. Prioritize. Once the functions are identified, they need to be prioritized according to the current systems, the resources available, and the support available. Begin with a top priority and outline the parts of the function or subfunction along with their relationships to each other. This should break down the process level where the actions occur. The process analysis is an effective tool in this action. Computer programs are also available that will help identify the components of each of the functions and subfunctions to create a model to guide the record management process. The functions prioritized must be clearly distinct. Operational and managerial functions must be separate even if they are similar. For example, a budget meeting would be different from a meeting of the board of directors. The task will be complete when every process is identified. Assess and review. Once the functions have been discovered and prioritized, an assessment and review are necessary. As you assess the functions, create a model to guide the creation of files and in their series. A large number of records require greater detail in the model. Additionally, the model should be assessed to determine if it is reusable. Well-made models are effective for routine or repetitive processes, and they can extend to the elementary levels. Creative processes may need to be classified or shortly after they are completed, and the model will not extend so far. After assessing the model, review it and label the different components. Create the label titles by using transitive verbs or corresponding nouns. Transitive verb plus predicate or noun. Create budget or budget creation. Develop a tool. The model will work as an efficient tool, but creating a diagram with the identifier will serve to accurately create and divide records into files and subfiles. These diagrams can be developed using record management software, or they can be created manually. The model and diagram will help create, capture, and maintain records. The model and diagram may demand a shift in the process and affect the final outcome of the system.
Lisa and Richard began a small business. At first, it was easy to maintain the few records that the company had. After 5 years, they had significantly expanded. Lisa had a system based on broad functions. All of the financial records, both sales and purchases, were stored together. For example, no one was able to find anything that Lisa filed away. Even Lisa was not able to find items as time continued. Employees complained to Richard, but he refused to address the issue because the records were Lisa's responsibility while he worked with people.
Module 7, Paper-Based Systems. The system of storing and maintaining records will determine how the records are arranged and grouped, and how files are built. Paper-based systems are traditional systems that have been used to maintain records before electronic or hybrid records were created. Arranging and grouping. When arranging paper records, the groupings can be taken down to the sublevels, or the sublevels can be arranged together based on ease of management and retrieval. Typical arrangements include subject, chronological, numerical. When records are arranged by subject, alphabetical groupings are typically used. There are 2 standard methods for alphabetical arrangements. Dictionary style. There are file folders for each subject arranged alphabetically. Encyclopedic style. Each folder is alphabetized behind the headings based on subgroups. Some files are arranged chronologically based on the date of creation. These can be difficult to retrieve. Numerical files have two different styles. Serial method, used when records are given numbers on the day they are created. It is useful for invoices and purchase orders. Digit method. The numbers are identifiers such as patient numbers. This method can be effective for large quantities of files. Alphanumeric files use alphabetic or numerical codes to replace subjects, but require an index to understand the code. An example is the diagram tool in Module 6. Building files. When individual files are created, the needs of the user must be considered. The individual file requirements must consider the following topics: the size of the files, what items need to remain together, methods of grouping the files, how the files will be retrieved. Different subjects or groupings may be filed together if they are small, while larger files may need continuations. It all depends on the documentation that is necessary. For example, a client file may be labeled by name and contain all the pertinent information about individuals, including purchase history. Other companies may organize a client file in groups. One popular method of file building is implementing a color coding system to help identify the groups in which different files belong. Elementary and intermediate. The intermediate levels of information can be represented in the file folder by creating subdivisions in the file folder. Files are limited because of space, so items classified might not have physical subdivisions of their own. Elementary processes are the basic actions created by processes of the series, such as certifications or signed applications. Elementary processes are not typically designated as part of the routine process. Only the most critical elementary actions are included in file modeling. It is important to determine if any elementary actions are governed by external legal factors. If they are part of the routine process, the action must be clear.
Simon hired Serena to update the filing system in his small company. When Serena first arrived, she noticed that the files were arranged in different ways by different employees. This arrangement made finding specific documents difficult to retrieve. She began implementing an arrangement and grouping standard for the entire office. She told Simon that the best option would be the digit, but Simon wanted files alphabetized because he did not want to have to look up the meanings of the numbers.
Module 8 Electronic Records. Electronic records lack the restrictions that paper records have. They are not as limited by physical space and can be easily created and accessed. More and more organizations rely on electronic records and implement electronic record management programs. They are easily classified and can contain more metadata than the traditional paper method. Classifying. Electronic records need to be classified just like paper records. It is possible to use functional classification methods with electronic records, but there are other methods of classification. Subject-based classification is based on broad subjects that are broken down to the basic activities. The problem with this context is that it can be difficult to maintain because it does not consider the purpose of the activities being recorded. Business classification links the files to the context of the company. There are typically 3 different tiers in the classification methods. Folders and directories. Unlike paper records, electronic records allow for the creation of much larger files and directories. Folders are placed within folders so that it is possible for there to be a single folder for a single document in a small subcategory. This action can create a fully functional record. Still, a record that is based on a complete model may be difficult to navigate if the model goes too far. Directories provide an order to folders and subfolders, making them easier to find. This can be easily seen in shared folders that break down records throughout the organization. Directories also provide guidance about how new folders should be created. Groupings. The groupings of electronic records do not have to follow subject classification. Different automated systems will help determine the best method for grouping and retrieving different records in the classification system. It is possible to create new records using search options that find all of the pertinent information at one time. For example, you can break down a client's records to specific time periods. Electronic records have the benefit of allowing greater change. Navigating records that do not rely on subject groupings does require an accessible index of terms used. One example would be the index from an earlier module. Module 9 Hybrid Systems. Even as more and more companies attempt to go paper-free, it is not always possible to remove paper files from the records. This tie is how hybrid systems become necessary. Hybrid systems carry their own complications and limitations, but awareness of the potential pitfalls will help prevent problems before they begin and allow you to design the most efficient system to manage and maintain records effectively. Routine processes. Routine processes are based on repetitive activities and exist in both paper and electronic format. For example, an application process might include a paper application and along with electronic communications. In a paper-based system, the email would be printed and kept with the application. In an electronic record system, the paper application would be scanned and saved with the email. In the hybrid system, this process would require the development of chosen guidelines based on office needs. For example, in an organization where various employees need to access the information, they might require the application be scanned. Regardless of which method is chosen, try to keep all of the process steps, documents, in a single location. It is important to cross-reference material whenever possible. When the original paper application is saved, for example, a note should be made that it is available in the paper record. The same is true of any relevant metadata available. Different programs and applications assist in the management of routine processes in the hybrid systems. Creative processes. Creative steps lead to creative processes. Creative processes are common in artistic fields, but they can also be special projects, such as architecture design or developing new programs or software. And they will have their own unique set of actions. Using creative processes in hybrid systems can be complicated. Physical documentation may be easier to manage in some instances, such as printed media. When both systems are used, the best option is to choose subject schemes and groupings to avoid confusion. When electronic records are implemented, try to keep the subfolders to a minimum. Regardless of whether the records are routine or creative, choose an official record method. For example, if most of the documents will be housed in a paper system, the paper record is the official record. Design. When electronic records are the standard of an office, there is no need to keep paper file cabinets. Although rare, a paper-based system will require file cabinets, but there is no reason to keep any record management software systems on the computers. In hybrid systems, you will need the resources for both. There are different items required: file cabinets, file folders, paper, printers, labels. Limitations. Hybrid record systems can be problematic. There is the risk of multiple copies of documents being saved even when clear guidelines are in place. Excess paperwork can cause confusion, particularly when the records are being purged or archived. Additionally, there is the risk of some documents not being filed at all due to miscommunications. Besides the possible confusion of hybrid records, they also take up valuable space in the office, especially when multiple copies of documents may be lying around. Even with clear policies in place, there is still the need for extensive education for employees to use hybrid systems correctly.
Luke and Misty were conducting a survey on the current records management program. The company began with paper-based records, but slowly began to integrate more electronic records. The survey results showed that the number of record errors had increased over the past year as the electronic records grew. Luke led some interviews, while Misty created and analyzed surveys. They discovered that there was confusion about the correct way to record files and how to maintain them. No one even knew which one was the official record. They decided that it was necessary to rework the policies and train employees.
Module 11 Record Maintenance. Regardless of the types of records or details of the records program, it is important to make sure that they are maintained properly. It is better to prevent a disaster than address it afterward. Be aware of any risks and make sure that everyone understands the proper procedures for storing and handling important documents and records. Proper records maintenance will also address archives and the correct records conversion. Paper. Paper records can be stored in centralized or decentralized locations. In many organizations, centralization of paper records is not logical or functional. We have touched on the needs of paper records earlier. Whether stored in a centralized location or not, it is important to be aware of the processes around them as well as the risks involved. For example, what is the process for sending records to archives? How are boxes labeled? What is the process for document destruction? Do you use an outside company? Once all elements of the paper record system are identified, the next step is to complete a risk analysis. Risk analysis. Number 1, determine the scope and context. Legal requirements, environment, business, regulations. Number 2, discover risks. Natural, technical, or human-made risks. Number 3, analyze the risks. Number 4, establish priorities. Number 5, make changes. Number 6, monitor and review. The danger and probability of each risk is examined and scored. The scoring can be as extensive as you want. Low, moderate, and high. Minimal, minor, moderate, significant, and severe. Electronic. Electronic records have very similar issues and decisions as paper records do. Even with centralized storage, there are other places where people can keep records. Computer hard drives, flash drives, storage servers. Unauthorized storage should not be encouraged. Other questions about electronic files include when to transfer them offline, if a software application will be used, and which one will it be. Will specialists be used to convert files into a different format, and will they be delivered using devices? Just like with paper records, performing a risk analysis will help improve maintenance before any issues arise. Create archives. Records that are stored for an indefinite period will need to be transferred to archives. Guidelines for archives are available, such as in the National Archive. There are different methods of archiving records, which include in-house archives, records management units, and external archive services. Regardless of the location, those responsible must have both technical understanding as well as record and archives expertise. Storage items that have specific archival guidelines include files, covers, boxes, shelving, cabinets, CDR flash drives, rackings, specialized storage. The environment and security of the archive must be precise. Humidity can damage records, and inadequate security can place the organization in jeopardy. Careful research must be done before any archive creation. Conversion. Converting files to digital images has the benefit of saving space. Conversion also makes the files easier to access and limits damage common in paper files. The issue with conversion is that it is officially a copy of the original. Legally, this can cause problems, but documentation will alleviate some of the hassles. Clear policies need to be made before converting records regarding which records will be converted and when. Additionally, the method of conversion should be clear, as well as what will be done with the original documents and how the conversion is recorded. Once files are converted, their storage must be carefully maintained. Electronics are sensitive to heat, light, and dust. Additionally, they become outdated. File migration, which moves information from one software to another, can help keep the files accessible.
Caitlin sent out a memo demanding that all paper files be saved in an electronic format to avoid their loss due to the risks of hazardous weather. Jamie, who worked in records, received the memo but was confused by the implications. Some employees began destroying the original records after they converted them to electronic formats. Additionally, there was no clear method for the conversion or directions about their storage. Jamie decided to address the problems with Caitlin before the situation caused more problems in the future.
Although this workshop is coming to a close, we hope that your journey to improve and apply the skills that you learned is just the beginning. Please take a moment to review and update your action plan. This will be a key tool to guiding your progress in the days, weeks, months, and years to come. We wish you the best of luck.